This week we're in Colorado hunting elk during the second rifle season, and the bulls are still bugling. Welcome to Elk Camp. So this week we had a new hunter come in, which is a real rare thing here at the ranch. Junior Philpot got to fill a very rare opening this year, and I was excited for him to see just how good the elk hunting can be at the ranch during the second rifle season. I'm Steve Chappell, and welcome to Elk Camp. So the first order of business was to go down to our makeshift rifle range and test out the Bergara rifle and make sure that it was still zeroed at 200 yards. Sure enough, Junior shot it a couple of times and it was dead on like it always is, and we were ready to go hunt elk.
Hunting with Steve is very active, very intense, and very awesome because he can call anything.
They're pushing away into the wind. We're just not hearing them. They're not out on the edge of the green timber, so they're just not going to get here before dark. So we're going to make a pretty big move and go back over toward the water.
So with the first day being a little bit uneventful, we went out again on the second morning. And the elk were bugling, and that got us excited. And we headed up toward the burn in the pitch black dark, and when we got up there and it started to break light, sure enough, there were elk there. I could tell right away that we had two different herds, one off to our left and one off to our right. And unfortunately, the ones off to our left kind of had us pinned down, and I just initially couldn't find a shooter bull in the bunch, just some little small stuff. But nonetheless, they were right there, so we couldn't just walk through them. I ended up getting out the Montana decoy, and that kept us protected and shielded from the elk, picking up on us. And we were able to look them all over, and again, just nothing that we were even tempted to shoot. So we let them move on, and when they got out of view, we started angling over to the east to take a look at the other herd. And they were up this little canyon and up on a burn. We started pushing in, getting closer and closer. Again, just nothing there that we really wanted to shoot. Finally there at the very end, there was a 6-point bull that came out that was all alone, very tempting as he walked across the burn there. We looked him over real good. It was a tough decision, but we went ahead and decided to let him walk that morning and keep hunting.
All right, so it's afternoon of the second day. First day was pretty slow, but this morning got pretty eventful. Got in the middle of the elk, and we know where they went to bed. So we're gonna go overlook what we call the big sagebrush flat. And I think we're gonna have some action and a lot of elk in front of us this evening. So let's go have some fun, Junior. Let's go have some fun ride.
So that evening we went back out, went to a different area, anticipating where the elk were gonna come out, and we were pretty much spot on. As prime time started to come on, we could hear bugling up the canyon in front of us, so that got us really excited. But after a little while, it became apparent that they were going up the hillside and staying in the timber, and they weren't going to work their way out into the sagebrush flat down there in front of us. So I decided to go ahead and get on the calls and try to influence them, but unfortunately, the big bulk of the elk had already decided what they were going to do. I did hear a bull bugling up on the ridge right there in front of us, and he seemed very interested. So I got out my matriarch cow call and just kind of kept on him. Finally, what really turned him on is I got on that threat bugle and started bugling at him. He just jumped all over that right away and was bugling back. Sure enough, after a few exchanges back and forth, here he came down off the hillside pushing a few cows. It was quite a fun show and a good call in, but again, not a bull that we were looking to take, so we just enjoyed the evening and enjoyed that moment and took the hunt into the next day.
This episode of Elk Camp is sponsored by Bergara Rifles. Our barrels make all the difference. Increase your elk hunting success. Sign up for the University of Elk Hunting online course at elk101.com today.
So the following morning, we went out again, and this was a very eventful hunt. We had elk in the wheat field to start with, and as gray light started to break, just like they always do, they started to push north into the wind. And we noticed there was a couple of really good bulls toward the front of the bunch, bugling and moving up into the burn. So we took the right opportunity while it was still pretty dark out and pushed up into the burn, keeping the wind in mind, making sure that we didn't get winded. We were able to just crest the ridge line, and right as we broke over the top of the ridge, there they all were, and the elk had no idea we were even there, which was really cool. And then they just all proceeded to file across in front of us. All at once, I saw what I call the broken sword bull. He was a very big, heavy bull that I had seen the day before the hunt started, so I knew it was that bull, and here he was at like 120 yards. But the frustrating thing was he had cows between us and him, and those big bulls always seem to have what I call big bull luck, and they're always on the other side of the cows, and that's exactly what happened. I thought about calling in that moment, but I just thought that there were so many elk there and we were so close that they would just look at me and then we would be busted. So I chose not to call. That bull went through that shooting lanes and went out of view, and we just didn't have a shot. And there were so many elk still filing through that it wasn't a situation where we could just pick up and go after him. So rather than make a rash decision and go after him and push him, we let him go ahead and move into the bedding areas. We looked at several more bulls, but no shooters. We just, made a wise decision at that point and backed away.
We had cows in the way of the bull we were going to shoot. That's the hardest thing when there's that many, is to try to shoot one of them. But we started pushing each other and both I got goosebumps. Yeah, we all got pretty excited. There's we'll probably see him this evening.
So that evening we went out again, and the action just continued on the hunt. We had a pretty favorable wind that was fairly westerly, which was good for us. So we pushed up into the burn quite a ways and got pretty close to where, I anticipated the elk were bedded. And we hadn't been set up for maybe more than 20 minutes when Raymond, who was running the camera, said there's elk running right at us. So we look up, and sure enough, here comes several elk just busting through the burn. At first I thought they were spooked, but then I could tell by their body language that they were just kind of playful and, running in to feed and eventually go water. No shooters anyway, so as the evening progressed, we could tell that the elk were way off to the northwest still. So we went ahead and took the opportunity with these other elk cleared and out of our way. We went ahead and pushed to the west and got set up in a different location. Always a tough decision on whether to call or not, but with nothing going on, I decided at that point to go ahead and break out the matriarch and start doing some cow calling. And I always say when you start calling, you better be ready for things to happen, because inevitably they do. So You know, no sooner had I blown a couple series on that call, and we see elk start coming from our right side. So now I'm thinking, oh no, these are the elk that we just had run by us a little bit ago, and sure enough it was. A bunch of cows come up and kind of have us pinned down. They didn't see us because we were not moving or anything. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more tense, we hear some elk behind us and to the left. So we slowly turn our heads, and here come two spikes walking right up behind us from the west. And you know, what a gorgeous scene with desert plateaus and stuff off to the southwest and the sunset coming on. It was just beautiful to see those spikes come in, even though it made the scenario really tense at that point, with the big herd out there straight in front of us, but not visible at that point. So we enjoyed seeing those elk, got some good footage of them. Of course, nothing there to shoot, so we made the tough decision that we needed to back out. We got out of there pretty unscathed considering the situation, and we were excited about what the next morning would bring.
Hey guys, I'd like to introduce you to my brand new Heartbreaker elk call by Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. Now this call is somewhat similar to my other open reeds. However, this one has an aluminum barrel, which gives it a very unique, distinct sound. Now I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking that aluminum is going to make it sound really loud and possibly harsh and brash, but actually it's just the opposite. It actually has a very rich, full, three-dimensional nasal quality to it, and it's just what the bulls want to hear during the rut. It's also got a nice, grippy, soft touch finish. So if you're wearing gloves out there in the field while you're calling, it's going to feel very nice and soft and grippy in your hands instead of slippery. Guys, again, this is my new Heartbreaker call by Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls, available at your local sporting goods dealer or online. Thanks very much, and best of luck on your hunts.
This episode of Elk Camp is sponsored by Steve Chappell's Zero Hunt Fees. Experience Arizona elk hunting with zero hunt fees. This episode of Elk Camp is sponsored by Steve Chappell's signature line of Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls.
The morning of the fourth day, again, was a very eventful hunt. The elk didn't disappoint us. We went out again really early. We had a very favorable straight north wind, which is good because that allows me to push us in deeper and kind of get us in position before the elk even showed up. So we actually got to a spot and were set up before it even got to be shooting light. And as we're sitting there, all at once I hear these cows calling, and they're back behind us to the right, kind of on the dangerous side of the wind. So being in Colorado and legal to do, I broke out some elk urine spray and filled the air with that, and I found that is incredibly effective to fooling an elk's nose. It's the only thing I found that actually will override their sense of smelling human scent. So with all the activity and bugling going on and us not being able to see the elk quite yet, all at once we hear a bugle straight off to our left. We all looked over our shoulders to the left, and here he came running straight at us, and I really thought he might step right on us because he had no idea we were there. So that was a little bit concerning. But then he wrapped right around behind us on the downwind side, and again I attribute it to that elk urine being in the air, that he never winded us. By the time we got rid of him, so to speak, and we were able to move a little bit to the east and look at the bigger bunch of elk, they were going up a burned hillside, but there was some dark green timber there, and the bulls had kind of edged off into the green timber, and really all we could see was cows and young bulls at that point. And unfortunately, we could hear the bigger bulls bugling, but they were in the green timber. But with having the cows and younger bulls there in the burn and able to see us if we pushed up anymore, we just couldn't really penetrate any further. So we just enjoyed seeing what we could see, knowing that those better bulls would be there for that evening hunt, and that's what we planned for.
So often happens with elk hunting here. We have what I think is a foolproof plan, and we get out and we're about to hike in here. And there's elk bugling right up here in front of us, so they're kind of in the way of where I wanted to go. And they're not on our property.
So the evening of the fourth day, the chips were kind of down. It was getting real late in the hunt. We'd had a lot of action, but just had not had a shooter bull in front of us. But that was about to change this evening. We had what we thought was a foolproof plan. We drove up quite a ways north in the property, and all of a sudden we hear these bulls bugling, and we did not expect them to be in there. That was kind of our approach that we were going to take to get on a ridge up above where we thought the elk would be. And I made the judgment that these were a couple of 2.5-year-old bulls. So rather than try to push through them and spook them, I decided to go to plan B, back off, go back to the ranger, drive around to the south, and take another approach in. And sure enough, that's what we did. As we hiked in, we had another kind of interesting problem that we encountered, and that's that the big herd of elk were already out and feeding down in the bottom of the big canyon. So although we could see them, of course they could see us if we made a mistake at that point. So we played it real safe. We hiked quite a ways to the south. We took a little draw down to conceal us. At one point we had to cross an open field with the elk quite a ways off. They were pretty distracted feeding and not expecting anything, so we took that opportunity, slipped across that open field and got away with it. And then we got up on the ridge line right up above where they were at. I had seen where the bigger bulls were at, and they were farther down the canyon in against the shade on the left-hand side. So I knew that we had to hike in quite a ways on that ridge line to get down there. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to us, there were a few elk that were still, we call them stragglers, were up there in the timber with us. And they ended up busting down into the canyon bottom, and they pushed the elk out, and we saw the elk moving west. They weren't real spooked at that point, so we went ahead and pursued them a little further. And again, after about another 10, 15 minutes of dicey stalking, we were right above where we were going to be able to see them.
This episode of Elk Camp is sponsored by Bergara Rifles. Our barrels make all the difference. This episode of Elk Camp is sponsored by Steve Chappell's Zero Hunt Fees. Experience Arizona elk hunting with zero hunt fees.
Just coming out into an opening. We could see them down in the field below us, and here's, 2 or 3 elk right on the hillside with us again. They busted down into the field, and this time it pushed the elk up into the timber. Junior was ready to shoot, and no doubt he probably could have got a shot off as the elk went across the hillside, but I just never like having a hunter shoot in, what I call kind of a frantic situation. Typically, good things don't happen from that. So I told Junior to hold off, not to take a shot, and I immediately got on the calls. Started cow calling, started bugling. Even though the elk were spooked, pretty amazingly, they settled down pretty quickly. The bulls started bugling back to me. And we could see them up on top of the ridge line. They had held up, trying to decide what they ought to do, come down or stay up on the ridge line. So we just sat down, and I started calling, more so than I normally like to do, to be honest. I probably called for about 20 minutes there, back and forth, and I noticed as I was calling that there was a big, mature-sounding bugle off to the right, and it sounded like he was down in the canyon bottom there. So after we got the big group of elk settled down, we decided to go take a look at him. And as we crested out into this little opening up on top of the ridge line, there he was, a big, pretty 6-point. I was a little bit tempted to call to him to see what his response would be, but in that situation, I just thought it was best just to not say anything, let Junior get on him. and make a shot. When it came time, Junior put the hammer down.
Steve worked his miracle. He caught him, settled him down, and then we snuck back up on him twice, and then finally we set up for the shot. And I gotta admit, I wasn't nervous, but I was so excited I could have screamed and scared them all away, but I put my hand over my mouth. Patience it takes to actually get an elk. The patience that he has with me making noise or whatever, he knew how to get it done.
After all that, after all the struggles we've had, close calls, I just can't hardly believe it.
Man, talk about an exciting hunt. This evening was just a culmination to a lot of hard work. And when it all came down to it, man, you made a perfect shot. Great hunt, Junior.
Thank you.
It's been fun hunting with you. What an exciting elk hunt we shared with Junior Philpot, a first-time elk hunter here in southern Colorado. And it was an unbelievably eventful hunt. And that final evening was just icing on the cake when we got that great big broken sword 6-point bull. I just can't imagine sharing it with a more fun guy to be around. I'm already looking forward to Junior coming back next year here at Elk Camp.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, where we post up some amazing elk photos and videos each week. And we'll see you right back here again next week for another exciting episode here at Elk Camp.